is entitled Closing the Theory Practice Gap in the English Language Classroom through Computer Mediated Communication Tools. So welcome everybody. I would like to remind you that you would have the possibility to make questions and comments along the presentation. You just need to leave them on the chat. And at the end of the presentation, I will be reading all your comments, suggestions, and questions for our distinguished presenter. Furthermore, I would be sending through the chat some particular a particular form in order for you to evaluate this presentation. Okay, so welcome, Professor Leidy. We are very happy to have you here today, and welcome all our audience to this magnificent session. So, Professor Leidy, the floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Jose, for such a nice introduction. I am very glad that you guys are here watching my presentation. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've been working for Santo Tomas University in Bucaramanga for the last 5 years, but I've been teaching English and Spanish as a second language for the last 13 years. So let's say that everything that has to do with technology, of course, innovative approaches towards English as a foreign language teaching have been my passion. And that's why in Santo Tomas University, we started with this flipped teaching approach that is now, let's say, working for the last 3 years. And that's why we came back to this topic of CMC tools. Okay, so I hope that you like this presentation, and I'll be more than glad to answer any of your questions by the end of the session. Okay, so as Jose introduced at the beginning, this is the topic of today: closing the theory practice gap in the English language classroom. You know, this is the big topic here for us to cover this year. And we're going to do that through computer mediated communication tools. We're going to be using this acronym CMC during the whole presentation. Now, let me show you the agenda for today. So the presentation is going to be divided in 4 sections. The first one will be talking about the definition of CMC. The second, I'm going to give you some general features of why CMC has proven to be effective. Number 3, benefits of computer mediated communication for us in our foreign language classroom. And finally, I'm going to show you, I'm going to suggest, let's say, some of the most effective tools that I have been using with my own students, and that are definitely developing both receptive and productive language skills. Okay. Now, let's continue with the definition. You know, what is CMC? What is computer mediated communication? So let's say that the terminology or the definition has evolved through time. You know, at the moment, let's say, this is the most recent definition by Murray 2000, and it's defined as an organized computer-supported interaction between people. If you notice the term interaction, it's the most important part in the definition, since we noticed that the definition started being very structuralist, let's say, to being more social. So we start thinking about communication not only with a machine, not only with a single screen, but with lots of people behind. So the social interaction is now taken into consideration in the definition. Traditionally, as you see on the screen, it was considered more as the transmission and reception of messages using computers as input, storage, output, and routing services. So we can see how the definition has evolved. This is definitely not a recent definition. CMC has been in the ground of education for many years, but it has been evolving through time. So that's something we need to consider, okay? Now, let's talk about the features, you know. What are the main features of CMC for the English classroom? Basically, we have 3 different main features. The first one, hyper-personal and interpersonal communication. The second, variety of media and hypermedia. And the third, multidimensional communication. Okay, so every one of these sets has to do with the characteristics or main traits of CMC. The first one, why hyper-personal? Well, remember that through computers, we have different kinds of interactions. We can have the synchronous interaction. That is, remember that this is the kind of interaction we're having now, for example, where the student and teachers somehow at the same time, you know, they set or they agree on a certain space. In this case, we're using Zoom, for example, right? On a certain time, certain date, right? So this is the synchronous part. But we can also have asynchronous interactions that has to do with, let's say, offline somehow, activities or assignments or projects where there is not really a certain time to meet. Students can work on their own or maybe with their peers, but everybody is not at the same time, let's say. Both of these interactions or types of interactions definitely complement each other. So that's part of what we're doing, or I guess most of us, what we're doing with this pandemic. COVID-19 was something that changed our lives forever. And this is something that I guess maybe we were not so ready for such an instant changed, everything changed overnight and we all had to leave our classrooms, like face-to-face interactions and come back to computers. And I guess this is going to be our reality for a little longer. But something that I consider we have learned a lot is that we always need to see the positive side of things, right? Or at least I'm a very optimistic person. And I love technology. So let's say that all this has been the perfect scenario for learning, for exploration, for trying to get the best of all the tools we have through computers. Now, let's talk about the second feature, variety of media and hypermedia. We don't only have audio, video, and text that was kind of like conventional, but we also have lots of hyperlinks. And I guess that you guys are familiar with live worksheets, for example, in which in a single document, online document, you can incorporate a video activity with some, let's say, filling the gaps, and then you have audio and you have reading, and everything is so interactive that the student is engaged in one single space with a bunch of activities. So that's something that it's changing and it's updating all the time, and it's part of CMC. Also, we have CMC is multidimensional, and this has to do with the types of communication we established. There are many different arrangements, let's say. The first one alone. Then this means the computer and the student only. One. So this would be when you have, for example, pair work, and you have one student working with another one, in a certain activity. Remember that now with all these platforms that we're using, like Zoom, like Microsoft Teams, they allow us to create also mini teams or private teams within the same video call or the same meeting. In Microsoft Teams, they are called channels. I think that in Zoom, they are called breakout rooms. And this is one of the best tools that I've been using during this year, since it allows me to split my whole class. Let's say it's a 30 student class. And so I can split it in groups of 3 students. And there they have the chance to communicate at their own pace, kind of like more privately. They really like it because that way they can the class is not always teacher oriented, but the class actually changes to be student oriented, so the students are the one engaged and they empower themselves. They are more empowered since they have the chance to be in charge of their own process. We also have another multidimensional communication setting that will be one-to-many. Like, for example, today. So this is one person leading the meeting, and then another group of people who are actually joining and also participating here, or many-to-many. Let's say that you want to split the class in two for a debate or a big discussion. So then maybe you split half the class talking about pros, and then the other half talking about cons. Let's say pros and cons against, let's say, euthanasia, for example. So this is how you can, there are so many different ways you can arrange your students in the classroom. And that is definitely an important factor when we talk about CMC. Okay. Now, let's talk about the benefits. Okay. Let me admit Carlos here. What are the benefits of CMC in foreign language learning? Let's say that I have highlighted 3 for this presentation. The first one, it increases student motivation. And this happens because, again, remember we have both scenarios. We have the synchronous encounters, we have the asynchronous encounters. So somehow the student is also in charge, when you assign certain activity. Let's say that you assign it for next coming Monday, okay? So the student has the chance to decide if he does it in the morning, in the afternoon, maybe at night. Every student has a different learning pace. And maybe we have students that are, let's say, afternoon mood students. They feel more proactive, more let's say, they work better in the afternoon. So they decide to do assignments in the afternoon. No? It's kind of different from face-to-face interaction somehow, because let's say that when we were let's say in the university or in the school, we have all the students at the same time doing most of the time the same tasks, you know. So in this case, with CMC tools, we are facilitating certain assignments, and they decide if they want to do it from the computer, from their cell phone, in the morning, in the afternoon. So somehow there is more flexibility, and that is something that has to do with our second benefit. It supports active, reflexive, and collaborative learning. I particularly like the last part, collaborative learning. With CMC, it's also possible to use lots of Google Documents, for example, where students will join at the same time, and you can see, you know, live performance. You can see how they're working. You can see how students are creating a project, or how they are drafting a paper. So that's part of being, you know, collaborative and reflexive too. And finally, another benefit of CMC is that it enhances the student autonomy. Remember that with time, you know, education has changed to be so traditional, teacher centered, to be student centered, and it's the student who has the power to, you know, be really in charge of this process and move on along. Okay. Now, let's talk about the next one that has to do with um, production. CMC leads to more language production, and this has actually been proven. How? Let me show you. As I was saying before, we have two different types of encounters. We have the ACMC. This is an acronym that we use for asynchronous computer mediated communication. And through this type of interaction, it's proven to be developed, you know, by Levi and Stockwell 2016. The main features or the main skills that are worked up here are writing and reading. Okay, of course, when the student has the time to sit, you know, at his own pace, to read, to writing takes time. So those are the things, those are the abilities or skills that are more powered, let's say, in ACMC. We also have CMC, like the type of interaction we're having here. This is the synchronous computer mediated communication, in which the most important skills that are fostered are listening and speaking, of course. And this has been proven by Payne and Whitney in 2002. Okay, so look at how these two settings complement each other, and how we should definitely be working in both. Okay, now, apps and tools in the English classroom. I have divided this part of the presentation into different abilities: reading, listening, speaking, and writing. Okay, let's start by thinking about reading, online reading, of course, in our classroom. So here on this slide, I'm showing you kind of like an outline of the steps to follow before you assign a reading homework. Let's say, if you notice in the picture, now we are not talking about reading a book or reading a photocopy, right? So everything has been changing. And then here, as you can see, we're talking about reading from you know, from your tablet, from your phones, from your computer, you know, from your Kindle. So there are so many different forms, you know, but this is still online reading. Maybe there are some of our students who may not be so familiarized with this, because they still need the you know, they still have the or missed, let's say, the chance of having a hardcover book in their hands, you know. And maybe many of us actually miss that part. But let's say that that's part of the process, you know, adaptation, flexibility. So the first thing you need to have in mind in this lesson outline for reading is to identify a student's age and level. Super important, you know. We just don't go and choose a random reading task or a reading passage for our students, and that's it. Now we have to consider age and level. It is not the same to assign a passage to young learners who are starting the learning process of a foreign language, to assign, you know, an online reading to a university student, right? We also need to consider level, of course, because if you are let's say it's not the same to assign a story fairy tale, let's say, to our primary students who are maybe A1 level students, uh, to, com- uh, to just assign a reading passage, let's say, to a group of business students who are maybe B2 and they are planning to just get better at fluency and pronunciation for their international encounters. So that's definitely something we need to consider. Okay. The second, we need to choose what reading skills you want to focus. So this is important in the sense that when we assign a reading task, we need to have in mind some sub skills. You know, what reading sub skills do you want to work on? In my next slide, I will be showing you some of the sub reading skills to consider before assigning an online reading passage. Number three, describe what type of text it is. So it's important that you tell your students, okay, the type of text that we are going to be dealing with this time. It's descriptive, it's narrative, it's argumentative. So they know the difference first of each type and they get ready to it. Number four, set a specific task. Okay. Again, it's not just reading for the sake of reading. Let's assign something specific for them. They should have a rubric of evaluation or a rubric of homework, let's say, to follow. So they will underline, they will fill in the gaps, they will answer some questions, they will maybe take notes and get ready for a role play of the reading, right? They will be maybe completing a comparative chart, at a T chart, maybe in order to have a discussion in class and maybe take a position against something or for something, right? Number five, make decisions about the format. When we talk about online reading, you have to decide if you're going to be sharing a PDF with your students, for instance, or if you prefer to screen share. You know, that's another possibility we have, like I'm doing now. But in this way, the teacher has the control. You know, the teacher controls the pace of the activity compared to sharing a PDF or a link, right? So that's a decision you need to make, you know, beforehand. And finally, please decide if the reading must be done in or out of the classroom. If you decide the reading to be inside the class, that means that the reading may be a little complex, you know, and maybe the students may need your help along the process, right? But if you decide to assign it out of the class, that means that the students feel more comfortable, they are able to actually, you know, monitor the reading and they can perfectly do it on their own. So you have to decide really if they need you there inside the class or if they can do it outside the class. Okay. Now let's talk about the sub skills. You know, what reading sub skills are actually, or what reading skills can you have in mind when assigning your reading activity? Maybe you want your students to understand cohesion. So maybe you'll have your students to concentrate on transition words, you know, along the reading, and then they will be using those transition words in their own writing task. For example, you can mix up abilities as usual. Or maybe you want your students to understand detailed information, simple sentences, types of questions, writer's opinion, or maybe you just want to go into specific grammar aspects of the language, like, okay, let's identify adverbs along the way, or let's classify types of adjectives, nouns, verbs, you know, regular versus irregular verbs. So it all depends on the purpose. What do you want your students to do with the reading? Okay. Now, some of the reading apps that I really like are these ones. For example, I love uh, I mean, there are a bunch of resources that you can have on the internet, but I've decided for these three because they are very interactive. So that's something that I like. You know, I don't want my students to feel bored when they start reading. On the opposite, I want them to feel like, wow, I really want to see these. This website, for example, Breaking News. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but Breaking News is a website that has multi-level resources. So you can find any kind of level here, and there are assignments already there or activities already designed for your students too. The second website I suggest, Musing Levels. In the case of Musing Levels, this is appropriate for any age. And British Council, as always, one of the best resources English teachers used. I have this one, learnenglishkidsbritishcouncil.org. It offers complete lesson plans. So that's as important because we don't only come with the resource, the reading itself, but we also have the pre, during, and post activities that you should lead your students to. Okay. By the end of this session, I will be sharing all these links in a document that I have already organized for you. Don't worry about it. All these links will be shared over here in this Word document by the end of the session. So you can take those links with you, you can explore them, you can somehow, depending on your context, your situation, your students, you decide which one would definitely work best for you. Okay. For example, for British Council, I'd like to give one example that I actually um, liked, and this is for young learners especially. Let me show you right here. This activity is actually called Game of Chores, for example. In this British Council website, you may be thinking, okay, but it's for kids and I have university students, so maybe they don't like it. But believe me, I would say the opposite. I find it particularly cool, and my students like it because it's the way the website is organized. For example, here there is a little introduction, right, about the activity. They always give you some vocabulary, some preparation, right? So you have the chance for the student to start getting ready into the vocabulary they will listen to in this task, for example. So they have to start, trying to locate the words along, finding the picture, matching words, you know. And once they get ready with the vocabulary part, once they ask questions and everything, then they have the chance to listen to the audio and, of course, play with it. So there are some questions about the listening they hear here. And you also have the chance to download the audio. I recommend downloading the audio sometimes before showing the website. So that way the student actually concentrate only in the audio. They can listen to the audio once or twice before coming back here to the website. Again, it's a really cool website. I recommend it a lot for all types of learners. No matter the website is designed for young learners, I also use it with my university students and they really like it. Okay. Now, let's continue with the presentation here. And let me see, how can I go back? There is any way to move this bar somewhere? Let me go there. Okay. Perfect. So let's continue with the next skill that has to do with listening. The listening skill is one that has been, let's say in class, sometimes, face-to-face interactions, we had some problems with listening sometimes, maybe depending on the resources of the school, university, there are some that come with excellent, language labs, and that's super cool, that's great. But what if there is a small school, let's say in the countryside, that counts just with a CD player, and we lived it. In all times we had to learn and we had to take tests just with a CD player, and it was hard to get the best quality and of the sound. Now, through CMC tools, we have the possibility, as you can see in the picture, the students have the chance to listen to the audios from their computers, from their cell phones. It's kind of easy for them, and they have the chance to listen to it several times if needed. We don't have that restriction of, hey, you only listen to it twice. At the end of the day, it's not the number of times they have to listen to. It's getting to the purpose or the target of the activity. And maybe your more advanced students will get it at once, but maybe we always have those students that need several repetitions. So we really need to somehow let them work at their own pace so they feel capable. What if you just play the recording twice and then at the end students just get so frustrated and they say, teacher, I don't get anything. Okay, let's do it again. Share the audio, let them play it, let them be in charge. Okay. Here I'm suggesting some lesson activities for listening, like jigsaw, like songs, like pictogloss. This is kind of like the dictation, the traditional dictation. We also have film clips, true false questions, and which photo. Okay. From here, I really like the jigsaw. Remember that the jigsaw activity is that activity in which you divide your students into smaller groups or maybe individual assignments, and you assign everybody or every group a certain part of listening, for example, or in this case, right? Then they listen to it, they get the main ideas, and after a certain time, you mix them up, right? So that way you will have a representative of each team regrouped in another one, in another team, and there they share what they understood or what they kind of got, general ideas to put everything together, like to put the pieces together. So that's why this activity is the jigsaw, and it's personally one of my favorites, not only for listening but also for reading. Okay. Now think about sub skills. What listening sub skills can we monitor here? If it's a video, for example, do you want your students to pay attention to body language? Or maybe do you want them to identify keywords, new vocabulary? What if it's a certain type of word, prepositions, articles, quantifiers? Or maybe you want to go beyond. Let's explore attitudes and opinions along the video or along the audio. Or maybe recognize connected speech. That is another possibility too, right? Now, let me show you some of the websites that I work with my students. This one ESL Brains, in case you don't know it, this is kind of like they give you short videos and the students have to answer the questions along the video to move on. So in the middle of the video, a question will pop up. They'll have to answer the question correctly to move on in the video. Otherwise, automatically the website will play it again and again and again till the student gets it right. This is one of my favorites. Definitely use it. My second website for listening, Hello, with 3 L's. This one is, I like it personally because it has so many different speakers from different nationalities. So they don't have the chance to listen always to the American and traditional British like speakers, but they also have the chance to listen to many different nationalities. They can listen to people from Austria, from Sweden, from Canada. So I like that because they can train their ears to different accents and different kinds of pronunciation too. Now, lyrics training is also a good one. This is for music lovers, of course. And here you have a music video. They decide what singer, what artist, and then they have the chance to either fill in the gaps, certain gaps of the song by listening and typing the missing word. Or the website also gives some options like multiple choice. So they can listen, get the best option, and until they get it right, they are able to move on in the song. So this is kind of like also a very nice activity, entertaining activity for students at all levels too. Now, let's talk about speaking. As you can see in the picture, speaking tasks have also changed. So now students are delivering some assignments, through different MP3 files or maybe a video MP4 file, right? But again, we are still evaluating and speaking, not only in our synchronous sessions, face-to-face interactions, but also out of the class. So you can also assign tasks for students to do on their own. They will plan it, they will repeat it as many times as necessary till they feel more comfortable and they'll be able to deliver it to you. Our lesson outline for this speaking assignment goes like this. As usual, set clear objectives. So what is the purpose of the assignment? What do you want your students to achieve? Okay. Number two, provide framework in the chat box. So remember that we have tons of tools, and that way we can communicate with the students before the task, during the task, and after the task, especially after when we have to give feedback. The students really expect teachers to give feedback. I know that sometimes because of the number of students that can be time consuming, that can be hard, but they always expect the teacher to say something. In terms of feedback, I personally recommend an approach that is called the hamburger feedback, in which you start with a positive reinforcement comment, like you did really good in the introduction part. I really like this phrase, for example. And then you move on with some comments of reinforcement, like you should improve. I recommend you to work more on this, and then at the end, you go back to something positive. So that's how the hamburger feedback goes: positive reinforcement, things to improve, positive again. And that works not only for speaking assignments, you can also use this type of feedback approach to writing. Writing also takes time. Now, number three, give clear instructions. So this has to do with the organization of the task. So please make sure to give a rubric of evaluation for the students to follow. They always forget things. We have to repeat it many times and keep things in paper. I mean, keep things written so they can go back to the topic, and then to the task, and then remember, like, okay, so this is my first thing to do, my second, etc., etc. Provide a demonstration. This is something absolutely important. When the student monitors, or when the student models, the expectation or the outcome of the task, then it's easier for the students to follow because they can listen an example. They can watch an example and say, okay, so this is what my teacher wants, and this is what I need to do. So they plan accordingly to achieve the target, let's say. Number five, wait for students to reply. This is particularly important, especially with synchronous sessions. Many times we, as teachers, we ask a question and we expect our students to answer immediately, right? But we forget that with internet connection and all these online sessions, we need to be a little bit more patient, right? So there is something that is called time lags. That means that those 5 extra seconds that we need to be aware of. So we wait our students to listen to, oh, the teacher is asking me a question, so I need to open my microphone, turn on my microphone or maybe my camera, and then answer back. So that takes time. I guess it's a matter of practice. With time we learn to wait a little bit more. And we know our students sometimes may be absent from our sessions, but many other times they're just there and they're having trouble coming back, trying to turn on their microphones, for example. Or maybe they're just trying to find the best answer, and they tell me, teacher, I'm here, but I'm thinking, give me 1 minute. So that's the moment I realized, okay, sure, please take your time, we wait for your answer. Number six, assign turns and raise hand. This is super important, especially raising hands. When we have large classes, it's important to give clear rules about how we organize turns so they don't talk at the same time. The idea is that we can listen to everybody clearly, so let's respect turns, let's raise our hand. And if they raise their hands, please let them talk, because many times the students teachers may be ignoring them. And then at the end, they decide not to participate again. So that's a matter of, organizing time in our classes for everybody. And finally, give positive reinforcement. As I said before, reinforcement in terms of feedback is always good. Start with the good, positive always. Okay. Now, let me talk about pronunciation tips. So here, for example, there are some different activities that you can use or tasks for developing and speaking through CMC tools. Making a YouTube video, for example, or maybe they don't, maybe what you want your students is to identify specific sounds, that match their mother tongue. So that could be another way to use, you know, um, and somehow combined listening and speaking. Maybe you want your students to record voices on their own, or maybe you record the lessons and then the students are able to download it and check errors maybe along the way. Maybe to check pronunciation, you can also have your students get closer to the camera to model sounds, certain sounds that are particularly different. Or maybe you just want your students to check EFL sources for stress and intonation. There are always certain words that are harder for everyone, right? Now, some of the websites or tools that I recommend, Forgo, that is a website that is used for production of words in many different languages, in many different accents, and they have the chance to listen to different kinds of pronunciation. So that's something I like. Flipgrid. I've been using Flipgrid this year. I've been exploring this particular tool with my students. At the moment, I'm teaching my students in Santo Tomas University from level 4. So let's say that they are an A2 level. And I've also been teaching students from the business program. We teach business English to certain faculties such as administration, international business students, accountancy. So they have a different program that concentrates into business English. And I've been using Flipgrid with them too. And this is a really nice website because it emphasizes the use of videos. Students can actually, send a video. It could be as short as, let's say, 90 seconds, a minute and a half. And they have the chance to record themselves through the website. I will show you the activities that I have created for my students this semester. And once they record themselves, then you can assign like pair work as the second stage of the activity. And then another partner will be watching, let's say, my video, and I will be watching his video and making comments about it. But when I say comments, I'm not talking about written comments, but video comments. So that means that the students can keep having kind of like a chain of communication videos, asking questions, answering questions, asking questions. So it's all about videos. And maybe at the beginning, the students may be like kind of reluctant, like, teacher, I don't like to turn my camera. I don't like it. Can I just do the audio? But when you give the example, and when you show them that it's very easy, then they get used to it and they like it. They can play with the application, with with emoticons, with filters, like in social media. So they learn to use it, and at the end they end up liking it. And we also have Bukaru, that is a voice recorder, very simple tool, let's say. What I like of this activity, for example, is that sometimes I want all my students to do a speaking assignment, but maybe class time is short. So if you have a large class, what you can do is you can assign the questions that you want your students to record, or the speaking tasks that you want to reach with them. And then you let them use this app, Bukaru, for them to record out of class, and they will send you the link. They don't really need to send you the file itself, like an MP3 file, not really. They just send you a link, and you listen to the link without downloading it to your computer. You just listen to it on the internet, and that way you can have the chance to listen to everybody. Okay. Talking about Flipgrid, let me show you the website that I have used with my students. Um, and this is Flipgrid. So Flipgrid, as you can see on the screen, has to do with discussion boards. You have to start creating first the topic or the task. And then once you create the task, you give them an example here. And then you give them an example. Then the students are able to follow the instructions and answer at the end. Okay. So these are all my students, for example, this semester. They had I have 33 responses, so everyone had the chance to create a video, about the topic at the top, and then other people make comments about it. So here I can see how many times they have watched it, or that means that their partners or their classmates have the chance to watch their videos too, and then they have the chance to make comments about it. So that's something that I also like. In this particular case, for instance, they were talking about global issues, and I asked them to choose one of the topics and answer the questions in a very short video that was 1.5 minutes long. I always give the students different possibilities, so that way students have the chance to choose the topic they feel more comfortable with, and then they start recording a very short video like this. Let me show you how it looks. Okay, something that I like, you also need to know about this application of Flipgrid, is that it has closed captions that are automatically generated you know. So once the students record their videos, they have the chance to see the closed captions and notice how close their pronunciation is, you know, to the real pronunciation of the message, right? And if they're actually pronouncing well, the captions will look perfect. But if maybe there is a word or maybe a section of their speech that is not clear, they can notice it from there, you know, and they can practice and practice. They can record it as many times as they want till they feel comfortable, feel they feel more, you know, more clear in their message, right? And they like it. They particularly like it because they play with all these filters, such as Instagram, let's say. So they particularly like it. I recommend it because the website also shows you the number of responses, the number of views, the number of comments, and even the hours of engagement the students have been on the website and working on this. For example, here they show 49.5 hours of engagement. You can do lots of, you can download all this resource. The website gives you the chance to download all this. And again, my recommendation, explore it. This is definitely worth it. Okay. Now, let's finish. I think I have just 5 minutes left for the session, the writing, the last part. The last part that has to do with writing. And this is, and here I'm giving you the lesson outlined to develop online writing, okay? Once again, we moved from paper, you know, drafting in paper, writing in paper, and, you know, doing all these corrections in paper to writing online, okay? And again, it's different, but somehow it keeps the same purpose, you know, or the same process. The first one, assign actual writing out of class. Remember that when we talk about writing special final drafts, students need to be doing that outside the classroom, okay? Now, number two, set up drafting in the class. So that is my recommendation. Try to give the students certain time during your sessions for drafting because they may be having questions and they want to ask the questions in the classroom, you know. That has to do with somehow keeping the basics of the writing inside the session and then final details, adding transition words, editing, they can do that outside the classroom. Explain text structure in the class. It's important that you always explain what you want or how the final outcome should look like. Always, as usual, provide tips for punctuation and register. Many of our students write in the same way they speak, you know, so they try to use very informal expressions when writing, and they need to know that we also need to differentiate those, right? Number five, pair up students for peer review edition. This is absolutely important. Many times we just expect our students to write something super fast and we expect them to write back and send the final draft as soon as possible. But we need to respect that the writing process takes time, and a peer review is essential. You know, believe in your, in your students, so that way you can pair them up and have them exchange their papers and review each other. Okay, that's really powerful. And number six, always provide feedback, either written or verbal, you know, after finishing writing assignments. That's important. Your students always expect you to say something of what they have been writing. Okay, as usual, my writing websites over here. I recommend Peer Grade for peer feedback anonymously online. You should try that one. Book Creator, that is one that you can use in case you want your students to create like a project, let's say, and you can create flip books with images, with videos inside. So it's very interactive. You should try that one too. And finally, I have Vocabulary Spelling City. That is a website for spelling, like for real spelling. You can introduce a list of words. You decide the words you want your students to practice, and then the website automatically generates kind of like practice and exercises for them to, let's say, reinforce those words that you introduced before. And it always has to do with listening, typing, repeat, you know, identifying sound. So this one is particularly interesting, okay? And at the end, I'm giving you guys some references. These are some of the references I used for this presentation. I will be sharing all the articles or some of the articles that I actually um, researched on to create this presentation for you guys today by the end of the session in the chat box. And again, thank you very much for listening. Thank you for comment. I don't know if you have any questions. I think my time's up.
Jose, sorry, we cannot hear you. You're muted.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you, Professor Jaime. I just wanted to mention that we wouldn't be able to have um, a session for questions and comments since the next session is going to start just
Right.
in the same minute. So we would invite our audience to leave any comments or questions via WOBE, and Professor Leidy will be able to answer them through that application. Anyway, we thank you, Professor Leidy. That was a very inspiring and thoughtful presentation. We really appreciate your help because it's very helpful in these times of pandemic in order to understand how is that we're going to actually cope with this particular situation that we're facing. Most of our attendees are asking me for your name since you do not appear in the list. So I'll be checking it with Professor, with the organizers, and I'll let you know because I just checked out, and indeed the name of Professor Leidy is not in there, but I'll organize it in charge so that you are able to evaluate the presentation with her. Okay, so thank you so much, Professor Leidy. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for being here today. And I will be sharing the list of materials that I used for this presentation in the chat box. So you'll be able to download it later too, okay?
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Leidy.
Jose, excuse me. There is one comment. When I'm trying to complete the form for the presentation of Lady, right? But her name is not there. So
Yeah. I'm just organizing that with the main organizers, and I'll let you know because so far I was not aware about it. So let me organize it and I'll let you know. I'll leave a comment right there. Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Okay. Bye bye, Lady. See,
thank you.
A pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I haven't seen you before.
Thank you, Juanito.
Okay. Bye.
See you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So now we have another presentation. We have the next presentation that is going to be held here. We would like to welcome now the next presenters that are going to be in charge of the presentation Identity in the Colombian ELT Fields, Gains and Doubts in New Discipline. So I would like to make them co-host. That would be Professor Pablo Enrique Acosta. So let me make you co-host, Professor Pablo, in order for you to have the same faculties as I do. We would like to thank all our audience that are actually getting into this presentation. And well, Professor Pablo, the floor is all yours. The name of this presentation again is Identity in the Colombian ELT Field, Gains and Doubts of a New Discipline. So thank you so much, everybody, to be here. And Professor, the floor is all yours. We would like to remind you that we will be, that in case that you have any comments or questions, you would be able to leave them on the chat and we will answer to them at the end of the presentation. And also I will be sharing with you a form through the chat in order for you to evaluate this presentation. Professor Pablo, it's a privilege to have you here in as a copy. And well, this is your room.
Thank you so much. I just want to ask you a question. How long do I have for my presentation?
That would be 35 to 40 minutes before the Q&A session. So we are able to have between 10 to 5 minutes to actually hold the Q&A session.
Okay, so I'm going to set up the stopwatch.
Okay.
And I'm also going to share my screen with you because I have a presentation for you. I just want to make sure that you're
Yeah,
looking at the screen.
we can see your screen.
Perfect. So I'm going to start the time here. Okay, perfect. Okay, greetings and thanks for being here with